The Galaxy S21 is Samsung's first flagship in years that actually takes a step down in price from the prior model. And while it does make some compromises along the way, it still checks most of the boxes to be a truly flagship level phone. But after a few months of using it, am I willing to recommend the Galaxy S21 to most users? Let's talk about it. This is InnoISO, and this is my Samsung Galaxy S21 review. We'll start off with one of the most controversial aspects of the Galaxy S21, and its design. While prior Galaxy S models had glass backs, this is the first premium Galaxy S series to have a plastic back, following up on the Galaxy S20 and the Note 20 from last year. Of course, a lot of people might not like the plastic back and feel like it's a huge step down from the more premium glass design, but in practice, I am probably one of the rare ones that prefers the plastic back of the Galaxy S21. Something about the design and the smoothness and the way that it feels in my hand all contributes to a really great experience with this plastic back. Over 4 months' time without using a case, I have not experienced any major scratches, which is good considering plastic typically scratches quite easily. And in my experience, the comfort of having a plastic back phone is that if I happen to drop it or I happen to throw it on a rigid countertop, I'm not worried about it scratching nearly as badly as my glass-backed equivalents. Of course, having a completely matte plastic surface means that this resists fingerprints better than most glossy glass backs, although some frosted glass backs have been getting better at resisting fingerprints over the years. One thing that doesn't resist fingerprints as well is the metal frame. Now, this metal frame is significantly better than the iPhone 12's metal frame at resisting fingerprints, but it still is pretty glossy. If I had a choice, I'd want something with a little bit more texture in order to be more comfortable in my hand, but that is a personal choice. I really appreciate the overall visual aesthetic of the back panel. Of course, it has the camera bump that kind of blends into the side, which is kind of a nice departure from more traditional camera bumps. But overall, the design just looks very clean and seamless and unified. The big thing that matters for me is actually in the ergonomics. The ergonomics of the Galaxy S21 are pretty great. If I had one critique, it would be that the metal frame should be brought back slightly further so it's easier to grip onto, but the plastic and metal frame merge together enough such that it's pretty easy to grip the edges of this phone. I appreciate the contribution to ergonomics, which is a huge departure from the experience of, for example, using the Note 20 Ultra last year, which had the super sharp edges that were really tough to grip onto. Anytime I pick up and turn on the Galaxy S21, the display just amazes me. Sure, we've gotten absolutely excellent displays from Samsung for quite a few years, but this seems like the culmination of great displays and 120 Hz refresh rate that really have come together in what ends up being an excellent experience. Sure, it's only 1080p, but I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between this and an older 1440p Samsung panel. And the fact is the 120 Hz is really what makes the big difference here. In the past, I've said that I haven't always been able to tell the difference between high refresh rate and low refresh rate displays, but after a couple months of using the iPhone 12 Pro and then switching to this, I really could notice the difference in the experience, and this felt a whole lot smoother. Even coming from some 90 Hz displays like the OnePlus 8 from last year, this still feels like a significantly better experience. And so I'm really impressed with the total display here. The additional benefit of the display with the Galaxy S21 is the improved under-display fingerprint sensor. Now, personally, I never had a huge issue with the older Qualcomm sensors in the older Galaxy S20 models, and so I really didn't need a huge improvement. But the increased surface area of the sensor means that it's a lot easier for me to be successful by just throwing my thumb on the screen somewhere. And we get closer to hopefully the larger portion of the screen, maybe the whole bottom half, being dedicated to receiving the signal. This solution for me is honestly optimal and significantly better than the experience of using the iPhone's Face ID, especially while wearing a mask, and the side-mounted fingerprint sensor of the Galaxy Z Fold 2, which that review is coming soon, so if you aren't already, be sure to get subscribed. Of course, the performance on the Galaxy S21 is absolutely incredible. I haven't noticed any major slowdowns, apps not being able to load. Usually the performance on this is top-notch. And Generally, compared to my experience using an iPhone 12 Pro, I don't notice a huge difference in the performance between these two devices. Now, over time, that might hypothetically change, but honestly, I think this phone has more than enough horsepower to last a good 3 or 4 years, depending on the software support, which we'll get to software support in a few seconds. But now let's talk really quickly about the battery life. The battery life on this phone is significantly better than most other smaller form factor phones that I've used. I've typically gotten between 6 to 7, sometimes a little bit more hours of screen on time. And usually it lasts me through a day, sometimes a day and a half. And it really didn't have many issues if I didn't happen to charge it one day and had to pick it up and charge it the next afternoon. To be honest, it's tougher for me to evaluate battery life right now, so I don't know what it feels like in the real world. But from my experience, this seems to be more consistent than a lot of other phones released last year, and so I think the battery life should be just fine. Now back to the software and its support. I've been using One UI on quite a few Samsung phones and tablets over the last year, to the point where it's just become a staple for me. I have no big issues with One UI, save for the settings menu seems to be a little bit difficult to navigate, which is pretty small. And then there's no option for a vertical app drawer. You only have the horizontal app drawer as an option. And while this might just be a preference thing, I have a lot more difficulty finding an application in a horizontal app drawer and searching for the exact position in the alphabet than just swiping through a vertical app drawer that scrolls endlessly. If I had my choice, I'd love that as an option, but I don't know if Samsung would ever add it. But then the next question about software is specifically in software support. So Samsung has been getting better and better over the last year or two in committing to more and more software updates to their flagship phones and even their A series. That is very commendable, and I'm glad that Samsung's finally actually committing to this stuff, especially considering that security updates are also going to be supported. Now, you wouldn't expect for Galaxies or the Galaxy S line to be the first one with the new software update. It likely will only come several months down the line, as we'll see with each Galaxy S release. But ironically enough, with OnePlus now falling behind in software updates, it really isn't clear whether you should pick Samsung or OnePlus if you want consistent software updates. Historically, OnePlus has been better, but it just hasn't been as great recently. Now let's talk about the cameras. The Galaxy S21, like a lot of other flagships in the past year, has 3 primary cameras, a standard, ultra-wide, and a telephoto. The standard and the ultra-wide are both 12 megapixel, and the telephoto is 64 megapixel. And interestingly enough, it doesn't have an ultra zoom lens. It doesn't zoom in quite as much as a lot of other phones on the market. But instead, the extra megapixels, the extra resolution, allows it to crop in at better details. Now, in practice, we'll get to how it works, but let's start out with just the standard lens. This phone takes absolutely incredible photos consistently and better than most of the other phones that I've used in the last year. It has incredible portrait shots. It has incredible dark mode. It has just consistent, great, colorful, punchy photos that I absolutely love. As a result, those photos that I get similarly from the Galaxy S21 often have more life to them, and they often feel closer to the actual existence of being there, even if it doesn't have the most true-to-life representation of what the camera can capture. It gives a better picture of what the air felt like in a certain landscape, or being with a person there felt like in a portrait shot. And that's the sort of thing that really makes Samsung cameras stand out for me. Generally, while the photos weren't quite to the same quality, the ultra-wide camera took pretty consistently great photos to the point where it added a lot of versatility that was well appreciated. The telephoto camera, on the other end, felt like it was more similar to telephoto lenses from previous years, where yes, it could bring out an additional 2 or 3 times zoom that was high quality enough for sharing, and it gave me a little bit more versatility, but not nearly to the point of using my Note 20 Ultra earlier this year, where the extra 5 times zoom lens was able to capture a lot more landscapes and people and events better because it allowed me to reframe the photos that I was taking. So for example, the few times that I did try to use the ultra zoom or the zoom lens on the S21, I was usually disappointed. So like when I was able to take a photo of the moon, I couldn't get enough detail for it to really pop, nearly as well as when I had a 5x zoom lens on the Note 20 Ultra. Of course, the lack of a 5x zoom lens was an active compromise that I was making by going with a smaller S21 as opposed to its larger brother, the S21 Ultra. Now, I understand that it's very, very difficult to fit that much hardware in a small form factor phone like this, and the added body size of the S21 Ultra allows you to fit that whole camera mechanism, but it's still kind of sad for me to know that I am compromising and not getting the same great experience with going with a smaller model. I don't typically talk about video in most of my smartphone reviews, but I just want to point out, while the S21's video is not bad, it is significantly weaker than even an iPhone 11. And so it's sad for me that I have to, again, compromise by going with a Galaxy S21, where a cheaper iPhone would actually do better in terms of camera performance, in video performance. And I specifically occasionally want to use my phone as a B-roll shooter if I don't happen to have a physical camera on me. And so it's nice to have an iPhone around. And I wish that the S21 had that sort of capability. But it feels like the stabilization is not there. Sometimes the exposure is not quite there. It just doesn't seem as consistent as just about any iPhone that I've used recently. This is one key area where I think Samsung has an opportunity to improve. And who knows, maybe take the stabilization technology that was in the LG Wing and make something absolutely incredible. Even if you do lock that out for the premium Ultra model, I'd willingly look at it and probably buy it. Finally, let's talk about price. I am super appreciative that Samsung dropped its price from $1,000 to $800 because I think it is a lot more fitting price point. But even after a couple months of this being on the market, you could already find this for less than $650 brand new, which is pretty impressive and a great deal, but I wish that Samsung had started with that price point. Now, I wouldn't expect them to drop their price $350 in a single year, so maybe it wasn't possible. But the fact is this phone is super competitive and definitely head-to-head with the iPhone 12, if not maybe the iPhone 12 Pro, depending on how you feel. But the problem is the price point is a lot more comparable to the iPhone 12. And I think Samsung really could kind of undercut Apple by going with a significantly lower price point. And yes, you typically can get the phone for lower than the price point, but it's harder for me to compare this with the iPhone 12 with a price that is always variable that isn't the original MSRP. Needless to say that I think you should do some real searching before paying $799 for this phone. I was able to get significant pre-order discounts and some promotions that made it a lot closer to around $600, which was fine enough price for me. I also was able to trade in my Galaxy S20 FE for a reasonable price of $550. All in, I think the Galaxy S21 is an absolutely incredible phone for Samsung fans and average Joes alike. It doesn't have any of the bells and whistles of a curved or foldable display or a display on the back, but it is just an all-around great flagship that's easy to hold in one hand with a great display, excellent cameras, decent battery life, and lasting performance. I really think that this should be the default for a lot of people looking for a great flagship phone, and I can't wait to see what's next for Samsung. Thank you for watching NOISO. I hope you like this video. Let me know down in the comments what you think of the Galaxy S21 and whether you have ever tried one. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe because it really helps the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.